Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Bravery in the Boardroom program launch event. You should be able to see my colleague Nikki's screen and a slide welcoming you in. We are expecting a few more colleagues to join us, so I will just give a moment. It'd be wonderful if you can see your chat. If you can't, if you want to click chat in your toolbar at the bottom, it'd be wonderful for you to let us know where you're joining from today, because you are almost very welcome. And I know we've got colleagues joining from far and wide today. Okay, Nikki, shall we click to the next slide for me so I can introduce myself? Thank you. So if you haven't met me before, my name's Monique Carayol. I am the co-founder of Bravery in the Boardroom. I am in, which is quite a sunny West London at the moment. I've actually had to move seats because the sun was blinding me. You wouldn't be able to see me. It's great to see there are some colleagues joining from London as well. And those who are joining from further, you are most welcome today. Hello, Steve, my Ardashian. It's good to see you, and Antoinette there as well. Hi, Martin. Good to see you. So, Bravery in the Boardroom, I am going to tell you a little bit more about it in a moment. My passion is to see boardrooms more representative of the communities and staff they serve. You also have my co-founder, Sam Hall, who's in the chat and online today as well. And I know Sam will echo a lot of what I'm going to share with you today. Nikki, shall we click on? Okay, so I welcomed you already. Hi, Jade, it's good to see you. This session is being recorded. We know that we've got colleagues who really wanted to join today but couldn't make it. So really important that I'm also going to encourage you before you go to help us widen reach and to share this as well. Alistair, it's really good to see you here as well. I know you're a busy man, so thank you for fitting us in. If you can't hear me, please ensure you've enabled your audio. And we have got you locked on mute because it is a busy group. It's a large group, okay? So we need to be sure that everybody can hear me and more importantly, hear the panel. Molly, always good to have you with us, and Francisca too. Use that chat box, okay? So Alex, always good to see. I'm sorry it's raining. I think Sean said it's raining as well in Manchester. But use the chat box. We encourage you to interact. Nikki will be prompting you for some questions later. But I also like to hear your reflections as I'm sharing things with you and as the panel is speaking with you as well. And if you haven't already, please ensure you're following us on social media. You know that's where you get a lot of the hot off the press information about events coming up. Nikki, shall we click on? So, what are we going to be covering today? I've got a busy agenda. I've got a job here, right? To ensure that I can get through what we need to in the next 70 minutes. Okay. You know, if you've been with me before, I'm a stickler about finishing on time. So, I want to share a bit about the current context. It's really important, I think, that today's conversation really focuses on what is going on in society right now as well. We need to talk about that if we are genuinely looking at how we create more inclusive cultures in our workplaces. My panel, who I've invited to join me today, are brave senior leaders already doing some of this work, and not only doing it in their own organizations, but across their impact is having an impact across industry, across healthcare, across law. So I really wanted to ask them some questions there that I hope will help you hear more about the how. I mentioned we've got an audience Q&A. I definitely will be sharing more about the Bravery in the Boardroom program because this is the launch event today. And before we go, I want to make sure you've got those last next steps. Farah, really good to see you today. I hope you're well. Great to have some board members joining us here from the North East London patch. So thank you. Nikki, shall we click on? So why does Bravery in the Boardroom exist? Some of you will know that. I said it very simply. We're here to ensure boardrooms are more representative of the communities and staff they serve, but it's not just about the boardroom. Okay, so why do we exist? We want to transform senior leadership by creating and building those inclusive boardrooms, but more importantly, those pipelines, so that we see up and down organizations, leaders who represent who they're serving in the community and also within the workplace. We challenge the status quo. If you've been here with me before, you know we ask the bold questions. We encourage a space where everyone can learn. And really, it is about walking out of the door here where you feel that you've had an opportunity to grow, to learn, to share, and most importantly, to act. That's what we're focused on here. What's the how? How do we do that? We really want to address that need for more inclusive leadership, better diverse talent pipelines, and sustainable cultural transformation. This isn't about a fly by night job. If you know me, you'll know I kind of don't like that term quick wins, right? Because actually, how do we sustain and keep momentum on what it is we're trying to drive in your organizations, but also across our society? Nikki, can we click on? So, what's been our journey so far? Well, where did we start from? Where are we now? Bravery in the Boardroom started off with a conversation between myself and Sam, my co-founder, about knowing that whilst we were fed up of hearing the same old tick box conversations, compliance statements, we knew that they weren't really tackling change in trying to create more diverse talent opportunities, to support organizations with really leading for cultural change in a different way, and most importantly, have an impact on that bottom line. We have a lot of people from the NHS here. It is about driving more effective and efficient care and quality of care for who you look after. It's also about seeing your workforce representative of the local communities you serve. The NHS is the biggest employer in the UK. It's got an opportunity to have a real impact. So we started off with roundtable conversations online because it wasn't too far after COVID. And we've got people here in the chat today who have been on some of those panels with us. So opening the door on diverse senior leaders driving change now about their journey and story. We then moved into holding in-person insights events. We wanted to share more about what was happening, but to create that in-person atmosphere. And we launched our insights video. So what have we learned so far and what is it telling us? That's where we've got to at the moment. But I knew that wasn't enough and I could see people were asking for more. Nikki, shall we click on? So really briefly, remember this is being recorded, so you'll receive this information. Why now? I think we all know why now, but sometimes it's important to have those stats that really hook us in. We're seeing, unfortunately, racist incidents reported to the Royal College of Nursing. They've reported that these are up by more than half over the last 3 years. If you look at the Green Park report that was last year about where are we on turning the dial now and more inclusive leadership and diversity and representation, they were seeing that actually the representation versus perception, there were real gaps there. We know from the McKinsey report, a very well quoted and well versed report, that we see, why are we talking about diversity? Well, more diverse teams bring better performance and can help the organization to achieve their delivery and performance requirements even further. But if we flip that, we're also seeing colleagues from lower working class and working class backgrounds earning less than their peers and colleagues in equivalent roles from higher socioeconomic backgrounds. So why is that? The equity balance, we're not quite achieving it yet. And our workforce are asking for different things. And both Kate and Cheryl, who are going to join me on the panel, will share more about some of the movements they've created that really look to what we see our workforce wanting, more flexible work in how they work now. Over 70% are looking at that. And then that rise in disability. I think there's an increase in people reporting that they are living with a disability, but we're seeing that rise in prevalence. So the bottom line is the evidence is clear, the gap is growing. So that's why it's now. Shall we click on Nikki? I think that means the need for brave leadership is here more than ever before. We're seeing increased polarization in society, the public debates on, the flag flying. We're seeing more fear. I'm definitely hearing and seeing more fear from leaders who are saying that they are ever more frightened of saying or doing the wrong thing. Fairness, transparency, and accountability are needed now more than ever. We've got to move away from the tick box and compliance. I don't think I'm saying anything here that most of us don't already know, but it's really that call out that organizations need brave, inclusive, values led leaders. And if you know me, you know that it's what I'm deeply passionate is about building that movement of brave leaders. So, Nikki, shall we click on? And don't worry, this isn't death by PowerPoint, okay? I promise you. So why the program? Well, we want to make that move. Thank you, Alex. We want to make that move to support you from the insights that we've gained and shared. We've spoken to hundreds of senior leaders. We know the things that make a difference. It's now time to support you with the impact, to really equip you and your leaders at all levels with the confidence and bravery to lead and lead inclusively. I also know, though, one-off sessions like these can help. And I'm not saying they don't, but it can't embed culture and truly shift learning into practice. And that's why the BITB program flips the script. Nikki, shall we click on? And Sam, your point there as well. You know, yes, we were blessed with having Nena here on our Insights London panel, but we've seen that, isn't it? We hear the conversations about you know, people are supportive of inclusion. We want to see representation, but when those opportunities arise, we're not necessarily seeing it follow through. So, as I said, how do we start to move what we've learned in BITB, those insights, these 6 chapters that we've given you on our video report? And Nikki will drop the link into the chat if anyone hasn't watched that yet. We've translated these insights into impact. And I'll be telling you more about the programme after we've spoken to our panel. Nikki, have I got one more slide? Am I right? Okay, so I'm not going to unpack this here, but you'll hear me mention the 4 pillar program. Before we leave today, I'm going to share more with you about why these pillars are, I believe, are the right one and what you get. So, what do you get when Monique talks about the program? What do you get under these pillars? But I wanted you to see the translation of how we've translated our 6 key insight areas into these 4 pillars within the program. But I also know you really want to hear from my panel today. So I'm going to ask Nikki to take the slides down. I'm going to ask Nikki to also invite my panelists to put yourself onto camera and to come off mute. And I'm going to give Nikki a moment to do that. Brilliant. Thank you so much. I am going to work my way round my panelists and just ask you to introduce yourselves, and then we'll kick off with some questions. So Cheryl, may I come to you first? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Monique, and good afternoon to everybody else. I'm Cheryl Samuels, and I'm the People and Culture Director at the Evelina, and I'm also the co-founder of #InclusiveHR and President of NAMP.
Thank you, Cheryl. And you're also one of our Bravery in the Boardroom Hall of Famers, right?
Yeah.
So I'm keen to hear more from you today. Hamza, hi, can I come to you?
Yeah, thank you. It was a bit nerve-wracking. I think I was the first person spotlighted by myself there, so I was glad you all joined me. Nice to see you all, and thank you, Monique, for the invite. I'm Hamza Drabu. I'm a commercial partner at DAC Beechcroft. We're a law firm. We do a lot of work with the NHS, and I lead our health team.
Thank you so much. And Kate, welcome, welcome, welcome. I just want to say a little bit for Kate. You know, I bombarded Kate just a few weeks ago and said, Kate, I'm holding this event and I really, really would like you to join me. Are you up for it? And she actually said yes. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, it's a real pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm Kate Jobban. I am Chief Corporate Services Officer at Milton Keynes Hospital, and I co-founded something called Flex NHS, which is a movement around flexible working in the NHS and also workplace safety and good experience. So it's great to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me kick off with the questions because I know we're going to have questions from the audience. So I want to be greedy and get mine in first. Okay. So, Cheryl, may I come to you first? You've been really speaking out on leading bravely in the current climate and what senior leaders can genuinely do to support their underrepresented colleagues. Can you share with us here today what you see as kind of key actions around that?
Um, so I think the things around actually kind of leading bravely around this agenda has kind of really required um, me to kind of really just be thinking about some of the, I guess, some of the practical things that people can be doing to actually really address some of the challenges that we find ourselves in at the moment. And I think that we need leaders to actively be starting to recognise what some of their blind spots are,
Mhm.
and actually having the open conversations with people, and in spaces which sometimes it's not so comfortable to be in those spaces, and
Mhm.
it's not necessarily any easier being someone from a global majority background speaking up in these spaces. And some of you will have seen, the fact that I spoke out when we actually had the recent set of protests in September. It's been quite difficult to swallow, actually, just
Mhm.
seeing the uprising and the level of emboldenedness
Mhm.
of people that feel that it's okay to make assumptions about people that they see, like myself, coming into the workplace, or just going about their daily business, actually, and people are making assumptions about who they are, what they are, and quite often it's negative and with lots of racist undertones, um, and some of is explicit,
Mhm.
some of it is implied. But I think that it becomes even more challenging when that starts to come into the workplace, because you assume that that's a place that's reasonably safe. You turned up there to do a job.
Mhm. Mhm.
And in actual fact, what you find is that you're actually working with a section of the population. Our workplaces will have differing views within the workplace. And I think the challenge now is for our managers and leaders to be a bit more savvy about
Mhm.
how they handle some of those conversations,
Mhm.
especially where people are expressing views about whether or not they agree with some of the rhetoric that is being shared.
Mhm.
And I think that we need more leaders, um, like the lovely Kate that we've got here, who's
Mhm.
actually spoken out. But actually, where do we see everybody else who looks like Kate as
Mhm.
senior leaders speaking up in organisations, and also recognising that, you know, one of the things that I've kind of spoken about also is the fact that comms
Mhm.
itself is a very wide profession.
Mhm.
And so, people may well think to themselves, why does that matter? Well, it matters because one of the things I learned in the pandemic as a national lead was actually the information that I receive in my feed is different than possibly what Kate and others might receive in their feeds. And so if you've got a diverse set of people that are actually in a comms team, it means that you've actually got greater chance of seeing what's actually going on. And what we
Mhm.
had with those protests that happened more recently is that I'm actually calling, sort of like really raising the alarm, that I'm concerned that we're going to have all these people that are going to show up in Westminster, and we've
Mhm.
got staff that are coming into work. And
For sure.
actually, what we found is that actually all the traditional channels that are notifying you, whether it's the police, or emergency preparedness teams, or wherever it is that they're getting the info from, the
Mhm.
intelligence, if it's not from a diverse range of people, actually it's very limited. And what
Mhm.
I could see is that there were pickup points across the country. I'd gone to Birmingham, I could see the flags had were just huge. They were everywhere.
Mhm.
And actually, people were turning up in groups discussing this stuff. So I think there is something about the fact that our leaders have got to become a bit more savvy. They've got to get a bit more in touch with what's going on the ground, and
Mhm.
not necessarily relying on traditional routes
Yes.
for receiving information, and accepting the local intelligence of staff, and being prepared to be proactive and sometimes stepping up and being the first. If it means being the first
Mhm.
organisation to say, actually, these are the protective measures we're going to put in place, then that's what they need to do. I
Mhm.
think we need to be less prepared to let global majority staff encounter harm and be prepared to say sorry. It's really easy to say sorry after the
Mhm.
fact. What I'd like to see is more proactive leadership, where we've actually got our leaders speaking up and speaking out, and actually speaking up in spaces to actually protect our staff and recognise the damage that racism does
Mhm.
in practice.
Thank you so much for unpacking that, Cheryl, because I think you've really brought it to life. What does it mean for you as an NHS senior leader? How colleagues, so how senior colleagues can be thinking about this.
Yeah,
Kate, may I come to you? Because Cheryl was referring to you as well there about, we know that you do use your platform and voice to speak out. Um, What would you say to those who may hear and welcome Cheryl's guidance? So that call to action that Cheryl just gave them, very specific. This is what you can be doing. What would you say to those who want to take that action and they welcome Cheryl's guidance, but they're scared of saying or doing the wrong thing? Nick, yeah, thank you, Nikki. Yeah, what would you say to that?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really interesting question because I think some of that motivation is scared of why are you scared of doing the wrong thing? You know, are you scared of what it means? Are you scared of offending somebody and doing the wrong thing and causing harm? And that's a legitimate concern, I think. And actually, that means you need to go away and do some work. Okay, that means you go away and do some learning, do some work, understand, you know, what it is that's, you know, how you navigate situations so that you don't cause people harm, so that you're an active ally in the most positive sense. I think it's if you're I'm anxious about being an ally because it might harm my career. It might mean that I'm outspoken in a way other people don't like. I think you need to go away and have a long hard think about what you stand for as an NHS leader, and the people that you are, you know, charged with leading and caring for in your role. And you know, I think for me there's something around, you know, what do you stand for as a person and in your and in your leadership, because that's also about what you will stand for actually.
Yes.
And I think there is sometimes there's anxiety, I think, for people that I don't know what to say, and so I'll say nothing. But again, I think that's about saying, okay, well then you're not, you know, you need to do more. You need to do more. You need to learn more. You need to listen to people more. You need to be going out and hearing difficult things and putting yourself in a position where you might not feel comfortable, but that's where you need to be. I'm sure I get things wrong all the time. And actually, I've been challenged by colleagues in safe spaces, in guiding groups and things, to say, you're really comfortable, Kate, talking about things like equality when it comes to, you know, talking about feminism and talking about gender equality. You're much less comfortable talking about racism and equality. And that was some years ago, and I thought a really long time about that, and thought, what am I? I obviously am, because that's how I've, you know, that's how I've been perceived. What do I need to do about that? And that for me was about, okay, I need to talk to people. I need to go away and do some work around that. I think there's also maybe some anxiety around, I don't want to take up space. You know, I don't want to be seen to be kind of coming in and taking up space in this. You know, that it doesn't belong to me. But again, I think there's something for me around it. But then you're just asking people who are oppressed, marginalised, discriminated against to do all the work. Here's all the work to do, you know, and also, you know, and tell us how to do it. And I think for me, that's, you know, for me, it's all about things that might be hard. You might feel they're hard to navigate. But it's so much worse to do nothing. It harms so many more people to do nothing and to stand, you know, in silence, while the people that you work alongside every day, your friends, your colleagues, your family members are experiencing racism, abuse, violence, you know, are fearful to come to work. And I think there's a moral duty to speak out and to use, you know, your voice as a senior leader in the NHS and your platform to be able to, whatever platform you have, to be able to take a leadership role. And you know, it's when we talk about safe workplaces, all of the evidence, all of the shows that, you know, workplaces are safer for people who look like me and who have my kind of privilege and seniority. And you know, as a white, straight, cisgendered woman walking into an organisation as an executive director, I have more privilege, you know, as much privilege as anybody could possibly have. And so actually, it's for me to be able to use that privilege to make the workplace safer for everybody, and to make sure that everybody has the same experiences as I do walking into work. But I do think, you know, there's a lovely quote, isn't there, by Maya Angelou: do the best you can until you know better, then when you know better, do better. And I think that has to sort of be the bedrock for any work in this space. Also being vulnerable, being willing to listen, being willing to told, actually, what you're doing, Kate, is the wrong thing. I know you're trying to be helpful, but you're really not. Being open to learning, being open to criticism, reflection, and being humble. But also, you know, getting out there and being vocal and visible, I think for me is just really, really important.
Mm. My goodness me, Kate, you you unpacked that there in terms of really voicing. You almost sounded like you were doing a role play. You know, like when you're voicing what colleagues may say, but you know, the yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but you just took us on that journey of a response. So I hope people were listening quite intently there, because what you unpacked there is what colleagues can say, isn't it? Yeah, but it's this, yeah, but it's that. You've just challenged every single one of those points and really clarified as to, but it still doesn't condone being silent. It still doesn't condone. I'm seeing colleagues in the chat. I can see, I can see the reactions going off here. I'm seeing colleagues in the chat, that point about, silence is complicit, isn't it? And you calling that out. So, but also what I really respect about what you shared there is when you've got it wrong. When you've got it wrong, when you've been pulled up, and how, what, that's been uncomfortable, but I had to hold it. And actually, I reflected on it and I looked at what I need to do differently. You didn't run to the back of the queue, right? Really important things there about the reality. So I think what Kate shared there is the real reality of allyship. It's not the easiest thing to do, but my goodness me, do we need it more than ever before? Thank you so much for sharing that. So Hamza, may I come to you? So I'll share a little bit more about, why I've invited you here, and, you're a big partner of Bravery in the Boardroom, but you sit at a very senior level in your organization. How do you see, what do you do to influence the inclusion being everyone's business and not just kind of sitting with one person?
Yeah, so yeah, Monique, I think it's one where I sit at the executive board since 2023, so I'm very privileged and feel very fortunate in terms of my role at the firm. But what I've noticed, I've been at the firm over a decade, and what I've really noticed is actually it is something that flows from the top, and it has flowed
Hmm.
from the top in terms of
Hmm.
that absolute commitment. You can see it just in the culture across the firm, and I see that, how even just the environment that you sit in at a board level, I think tells you a lot about what's going to permeate throughout the firm. So
Hmm.
coming in as someone that was relatively junior,
Hmm.
with new ideas
Hmm.
from an ethnic minority background, um, how am I going to feel in there? Am I going to feel like people want to listen to me, or am I going to
Hmm.
feel like actually it's going to take me a while to warm up and be able to say what I really think?
Hmm.
Actually, I think that culture of allowing people the space to contribute, being clear with people around how valued their input may be, being able to challenge
Hmm.
freely without worrying that actually, once I've left that meeting, that someone's going to be saying, "Hang on a minute,
Hmm.
who let him in?"
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
so, so there are all of those things where actually the environment was set up. It has been set up, and there's been a real commitment, particularly from our senior partner and our managing partner over the last decade, to ensure that we have that.
Hmm.
I think for us it's critical. We do a lot of work with the NHS,
Yes.
and there's something that's really critical around. I think what we're seeing in the NHS and the issues we have around making sure there's enough representative leadership in the NHS, that is very close to my heart. So I guess what I would say is it feels like that culture is key in terms of
Hmm.
embedding that, so that
Hmm.
it's not just an HR thing. It's not just a few groups that might be focused on particular aspects around inclusion. This is
Hmm.
something that's got to be a whole firm approach, and there are a number of things that we're doing, which I can come on to later, Monica, around
Yeah.
how we facilitate that in practice.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for unpacking that. And as I said, was really keen to have you here, as sometimes we can think everything revolves around the NHS and healthcare, isn't it? And whilst you work very closely with that, I think it's great to have some insights from you from the law industry as well. So thank you. Kate, may I come back to you? Because I know when we were speaking, you were making a point to me about, the NHS is the UK's largest employer. It's got a real opportunity to have an impact on driving change. But what in your view should NHS leaders be focusing on right now when it comes to the workforce and attracting and retaining talent?
Thank you. I think for me, I feel very passionately about this. I think there's the fundamental things that we have to keep going back to because we haven't got them in place yet. There is a safe workplace. So tackling violence, tackling racism, tackling sexual harassment. We know that all those things happen daily in the workplace in the NHS. And we have to consistently, persistently tackle those issues and make our workplaces a safe place to be, and to be intentional about that and to be constant about it. And even when it's, even when it's difficult, even when it's and particularly when it's difficult, actually, even as society, as Cheryl was talking about earlier, that we're seeing these shifts and changes is really unpleasant. Right-wing marches, the normalisation of discriminatory language, and the rise of the far right. We have to be really intentional about it, really focused. And I think there's also something for me around, we've got a workforce whose expectations of work have changed. So they're not changing, they've changed dramatically. And COVID, I think, was a catalyst for that, but it's not the only catalyst. I think we've got several generations now in the workforce. The generation that who are retiring want a very different, or have expected and received a very different career experience to the generation coming into the workforce now, and the generations in between. I'm very keen that we look at 50-year careers, and we look at the careers that people will have. We want to keep people in the NHS. We're almost not entirely, but almost unique in that we want to get people from school and college and university and keep them until they retire. And actually, so much of life happens then when you're at work. How do we become an employer that can be agile and responsive to people's needs in life? Whether that is further education and study, whether that is parenthood, whether that is bereavement, whatever it might, caring responsibility, whatever it might be. And I think, that's really, really important because it enables people to stay at work. And we want to retain talent, we want to develop talent, and we want to do that with diverse talent. And I was talking to a group this morning about disability, for Disability History Month, around actually, how do we do that well for people with disabilities, hidden and visible? How do we make sure that actually we are responsive, and that we're getting those fundamentals right for everybody all the time? And I think we often focus on the attracting of talent, and then we just stop after that. We've got you in here now, so you'll naturally just stay forever. And that's not the case. People are much, much more willing to be mobile in their careers, and to restart their careers, to take different career paths, to do different things. And so we have to work much, much harder to keep people. And I think there's a little bit of arrogance in the NHS, and as it possibly is across the public sector, that people will come in, they want to work in the public sector, and they'll stay because out of vocation, out of a sense of purpose. But we can't abuse that. We need to demonstrate to our staff that we share that sense of purpose, and that will help them to keep that kind of spark alive in them throughout their careers, rather than pour cold water over it. So I think there's that for me is what we need to do, and to really understand what motivates people now. So I think for generations, certainly for previous generations, and perhaps also for my kind of age group, there is a kind of sense of duty, and it's my duty is to do in public service. But I think that's much less the social contract and employment contract with people coming into the workforce now. I think that's life is so very different. There's no guarantees about mortgages and home ownership and all that kind of stuff. It's totally different for my kids than it has been even for me. So I think there's some really interesting stuff we can do then about understanding the needs of that cohort of people coming in and how we keep them.
And Kate, how does that connect to, you co-launched Flex NHS? Some colleagues on the call will be familiar with that. If you work in the NHS, you may be familiar with it. But tell me a bit more about the impact that's had, because as you just mentioned there, we've got that term we hear, isn't it? Intergenerational teams, isn't it? You're saying here, we want to attract the right talent and keep them and support them through their life journey as they work with us. Because I think, if I may add, people give the best years of their life, don't they, to employers like the NHS. But how does Flex NHS help? Where does it come into play?
So Flex NHS, I co-founded with a colleague and friend, Asha Cowie, who and we both were both mums at the time. I've got 3 children who were struggling with kind of how do we make this work really well. And again, I thought, well, actually, I'm in a director position, and have been very fortunate. I've had very supportive bosses. I've had people that have enabled me to juggle having 3 kids and a full-time job, which is, challenging in all sorts of ways. And again, it was about saying, well, we know that's not the case for everybody. It's really tough for everybody, and it's very, very much easier for me as a senior person who's got lots of agency over their own time, to be able to work flexibly. And I'm in the office, most days, but I've got flexibility in and around that to pick up my kids from school or to, whatever. But actually, if you're a newly qualified nurse, if you're a healthcare assistant, if you're one of the cleaning team or the catering team, or you're a resident doctor, where's your flexibility? Where do you go to ask for that flexibility? Who's looking out for you, and who's looking after you, in terms of being able to work flexibly? And we teamed up with someone called Anna Whitehouse, who is an influencer. She's also an author and all sorts of other things, who started a movement called Flex Appeal. And we were really keen to bring that into the NHS and to be able to start conversation around what good looked like in terms of being able to offer people flexibility. And it wasn't and isn't all about, being able to work at home. For some people, it's about being able to start their shift a little bit earlier and finish a little bit earlier, to be able to do a pick up and a drop off. Or it might be around a working pattern to enable them to minimise their nursery fees, whatever it might be, or look after an elderly relative. It doesn't really matter what it's for, but it's just about having all of that different flexibility built into the NHS. So when we started Flex NHS, it was with that kind of movement in mind to generate, both a positive movement for change and also increase visibility around working flexibly, because it wasn't very visible at the time. And we worked really closely with NHS England and lots of other stakeholders. And NHS England, did some really brave things. They changed the terms and conditions for NHS employees, made flexible working by default part of the T's and C's, and also introduced the right to flexibility from day one of employment, which was pre the employment bill change. So, I think still there's lots of barriers to flexibility. There's lots of people that don't get to work flexibly. And there's lots of work still to do in that space, but that's why we set up the movement, and then we broadened it out a little bit to kind of look at working experience and working lives more generally, and about how we, what's good about working in the NHS, what can we do more of in terms of the good stuff, and where do we need to improve.
Okay, thank you. So I will, if anyone hasn't heard of Flex NHS, I don't want to put you on the spot, all right, Kate, but if you've got a link, drop it into the chat. If not, we make sure that goes out to people after. But you made a really important point in there about having agency as a more senior colleague, to be able to almost have autonomy over some of the flex you can have. But how do we think about our colleagues working in more junior roles and entry level, and that Flex NHS can enable that? So thank you for unpacking that. Cheryl, from the HR lens, if I may come to you, you co-founded Inclusive HR, which you mentioned. I don't want to try and describe it myself, but in a couple of minutes, could you just explain what that focuses on and what you think HR, because our people and HR teams are integral to what we're talking about, isn't it? Driving inclusive cultures, attracting, retaining, and developing talent. So what do you think HR and people teams need to focus on to be fit for the future? But tell us a little bit about Inclusive HR.
So hashtag Inclusive HR is a social movement for change that was founded by myself and Rachel Tyler, who was the development director at the HPMA. And it was founded based on the experience of global majority HR professionals across the piece at every level, who've actually engaged in some groundbreaking research that we commissioned, which happened on the back of me mentoring a number of people and actually noticing the commonality in some of the experiences that they were having. And what that research then kind of showed us was the disparities in the experience of global majority HR professionals, and actually some of the things we see mirrored in organisations are mirrored also within our profession. And there's never been a time where we've actually really looked at our own backyard to actually think about, as HR professionals, how do we set the tone? How do we ensure that we are diverse? How do we ensure that we are representative of the communities that we're serving and the organisations that we're serving and advising and guiding and leading. And if the experiences of our HR professionals is not good, that's not a great indicator of confidence that the organisation can have, that we can also dispel and address many of the issues that we see within our organisation. So essentially, the movement is about recognising the racial disparities we see within the HR profession, and looking at what the interventions and actions are that we can take to redress that collectively as a profession. And I strongly believe that we will have we can be the biggest ambassadors of the change that we want to see if we can demonstrate it ourselves.
Yes.
And we can have the effect more broadly across an organisation and beyond.
Yes.
So that's essentially what it's about. And I'd encourage people to go to the HPMA website if you're wanting further information on it, and to know a bit more about the 5-step challenge to change that I created, which has gone out and is live across 85 organisations across the country.
Say that again. You said it too quickly. 85 organisations across the country have signed up to the 5-step challenge to change, right?
Yeah.
So when you talk about building a movement, okay, just want to call that out there. Absolutely amazing. And all what our panelists are sharing, for anything that we share here, we will make sure that follow-up email when you get the recording, we'll also share the links in there, all right, so people can go to them. So Cheryl, can I jump in there and connect the dots on? So when I listened to what you were saying there about HR and people teams, and I asked you that question about being fit for the future, what would you also say about that support for hiring managers in recruiting more inclusively? May I jump that in as well?
So I'd say that if HR wants to be fit for the future, we've got to move beyond compliance and start acting as real change agents and change makers. And for me, there are a couple of core things that we kind of need to focus on. And those things are focused on behaviour as much as process. So I think the first thing for me is probably about moral courage. HR can't stay neutral when people are harmed by inequity. I think we need to challenge unsafe cultures and call out poor practice, even when it's uncomfortable or it's politically awkward.
Yes.
I think that we need to be curious. We need to have curiosity with intent, and we need to, I think we must ask harder questions about who benefits from the systems and who's disadvantaged. And that means us kind of listening more deeply, using the data, and being willing to rethink how we've done things beyond how we used to do them or what we're used to or have been trained in. And I think the disciplinaries is a really good example of that, where, we're trying to move to a restorative approach as opposed to just automatically thinking we need to discipline people. I think the other area I'd just call out was, I think we need to be equity focused in terms of our design. We need to think about the policies and the people processes. Those need to be built with inclusion at the centre. And I remember ages ago someone talking to me about the importance of trying to design out inequality as opposed to just simply doing and regurgitating the same thing. And it need not be an afterthought. So I think recruitment, development and reward should actively create fairness, not just avoid the risks that we are always trying to work towards avoiding. And then I think the HR should also make sure that it's working alongside leaders, staff and networks and trusted partners, and not just to be seen as the people that are actually enforcing everything. And this is the rules, this is how you do it, this is what you must comply with, and this is why you shouldn't do it. I think we need to create change with people, not to them. And I think that builds credibility and influence. And I think lastly on that particular point, I'd say you need visible accountability. HR should model the standards that we expect from others. And if we're talking about inclusion in our own teams, that means that we need to be diverse, which speaks to what I was just talking about in terms of hashtag inclusive HR. And And we also need to be thinking about our decision making and ensuring that those are transparent. And we should be open to challenge, because actually we should be accountable for the decisions we make. But it's not just
Yes.
HR, it's
Yeah.
every leader in every part of the organisation. So I think if HR can bring that courage, the curiosity, equity, partnership, and accountability, if you like, then I think that we're not just managing the system, we're actually more in a place of actually reshaping it to be fairer, healthier, and, I guess fit for the future.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking us through that. I think, gosh, how am I gonna sum this all up, right?
Sorry.
No.
That's what happens when you
It's
ask for our
good.
views, Monique.
No, this is exactly what we want. Gems galore, right? That's one of my terms, but that's so much in there. I don't even want to try and sound, but you answered those questions so powerfully for us. So thank you. I know I'm conscious of time and Nikki's got some audience questions, but Hamza, I just wanted to come to you and kind of just hear a bit about what DAC Beechcroft are doing. I know you've got a particular focus on social mobility,
Yeah.
and just to say a little bit about why you
Yeah.
you said yes to me when I asked you to kind of partner with Bravery in the Boardroom.
The second one's very easy, but let me start with the first one. I mean, we engage and collaborate, so I think that's the first thing. We know that actually that there are organizations out there that are really good at being able to help us plug in, particularly when it comes to social mobility. Now, law as a profession, I think, inevitably there are a number of sort of factors that mean you end up with a particular cohort of people from that have perhaps gone through university and all landed in a particular
Hmm.
place. Now,
Hmm.
we as a firm, I think, have been one of the first to really push hard on apprenticeships, and we've got lots of people coming through that route, which has been incredibly successful for us. And I think it has massively broadened the opportunity for people to get into the law in a different route where you don't end up needing to be able to bear the debt of going through being a student and everything that comes with that. And I think that there are some absolute obvious perhaps barriers to entry of the profession if you have to factor all of that in. So that's
Hmm.
been a real enabler for us. Um, we've been saying no to things. So we had a really good debate at the board where actually we have this sort of informal, you can have 3 days of work experience. And so, you'll get clients that will have, sons or daughters that may want to have some work
Hmm.
experience at the firm.
Hmm.
And inevitably, the discussion again was, well, what does this do for us? It just propagates actually, usually people from a particular social demographic who will then be able to put, we've been at this law firm on my CV.
Hmm.
Is that the right thing to do? And we had a long debate. Should we have some exceptions because some clients are really important and we really need to make no exceptions actually. And it was great to hear it because actually we thought we need to have this as a completely level playing field, and we've got to trust and be thankful that we've got these partnerships with a number of different organizations that can allow work experience from a range of diverse backgrounds without excluding anyone, but you've then
Hmm.
got some transparency around the process of bringing people in so that people can access the profession from all different backgrounds. So I'm really proud that we've actually taken a bit of a stand on that because it's very easy to take the easy option and have a bit of an exception, but I
Hmm.
just don't think it was the right thing. So
Hmm.
that's been really good. Reconnect as well. So in particular, there are lots of those that may want to get back into the legal profession that have been out of the legal profession for some time. So we've developed a program where there is support for those that may, for example, have taken a career break, may need some, how do I get back into private practice or something that I've done before, but it was a decade ago, and now I
Hmm.
just feel so far away from what that looks like in reality. And we've got a program that's been really successful, actually, retraining, bringing people back into the profession. So there are a
Hmm.
number of different things. We collaborate with aspiring solicitors, the Social Mobility Foundation, the Black Solicitors Network. We do mentoring. People are passionate about that. I think
Hmm.
again, it goes to working with the NHS. There's a sort of sense of the social value of what we are doing as a firm that's really important. So these
Hmm.
things, I think, are a natural adjunct to that. Um, the bit about you and Bravery in the Boardroom, Monique,
Hmm.
we've been a partner because I think we worked together when you were in the NHS.
That's
I've
right.
seen I've seen that you've dealt with and you've seen it firsthand, and the way that you're able to broach the conversations, and I'm sorry if this makes you blush, but the way that you're able to broach those conversations in that setting, I think you do it so thoughtfully and carefully these aren't easy discussions to have.
Mm.
And I think you have got an ability to convene in a way that I think is very unique. So
Mhm.
I would say bravery in the
Yeah.
boardroom as a movement is massively important. We all want to see more representative leadership
Yes.
across the NHS. The story that really kicked me, it was with a client who I'd worked with for a really long time, and I'll be brief.
It's all right.
She was looking for a job, and she had a surname from her partner. It was a Sri Lankan surname. It was, one of those things where she kept applying for jobs with that surname, didn't get any traction despite the fact she had an excellent CV and an excellent track record. She
Hmm.
changed her name back to her maiden name,
Hmm.
which was a name that was perhaps easier to grip, more straightforward, and all of a sudden she had lots and lots of job offers. I talked to her, having reconnected with her after lots and lots of years, and when I heard this
Hmm.
story, it made me think it's so important to support organizations like Bravery in the Boardroom doing what
Hmm.
they're doing, because these things I'm sure happen over and over again in lots of different ways, and
Yes.
that's just the thin edge of the wedge, I'm sure. So all of
Yeah.
those sorts of things, but yeah, I think it's a bit of a no-brainer. I'm sure everyone that's on this is hearing the same from what you do, Monique. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Hamza. And yes, I am always on my soapbox. You lot all know that if you've heard me speak, but actually it's with partners like yourself who have said yes, who support the cause. And I think I've seen a question there from Mike. Hi, Mike. I can see you up there. Before you joined us, Mike, Kate unpacked uh, why she's here and what she says. She took us on a little journey. So I want to make sure you get the recording, because she took us on that journey of what she says when colleagues do resist allyship or make excuses as to why they can't, or they're scared, or Kate took us through a range of scenarios, if I say it that way, and how she rebuts those those points to actually say no, there is more we can all do, and also spoke to us very candidly about um her learning, her journey, and when she had to go away and learn, and when she had to look in the mirror and hear feedback from colleagues, and she did the work and explaining why actually it is not for colleagues who are marginalized. So Kate, I hope I'm summarizing that okay. I think it's a brilliant question, Mike, and I know Kate unpacked it before you joined us. Jeanette also made a point. I'm going to hand over to Nikki because we've got time for a few questions. But Jeanette, I think also Kate touched on that point about when people are blacklisted. Um, that thing, I call it losing social capital. So whether you are in the majority and you start speaking up and speaking out, you can become blacklisted. People roll their eyes when you start speaking again. If you're in a more junior role, you can be blocked, right? Your path is blocked. I know Cheryl experienced some of that when you were looking for your director role, Cheryl. So there are experience of this all the time, and it's not because I want to put anybody off being brave. I think it's important to be real about that can happen. So some people will block you, some people will try to silence you. It is difficult to get people off that list, but actually what we need is what I said at the beginning. Those brave, inclusive, values-led leaders who see and value colleagues who will speak up. And it's not just that strap line for the freedom to speak up, weak it genuinely is. If you do speak up, we'll provide that psychological safety. But Nikki, I want to hand over to you. I know we've got time for a few questions, so do you want to fire away from the audience?
Thanks, Monique. I just want to say to the panel, thank you for amazing insights and tips on the how and not just the what. So thank you so much. I've got a question for Cheryl, and it's from Dami. Often, when managers say HR advice is discretionary, does that imply HR input doesn't strongly influence decisions?
Good question. I think that the misconception about the way in which HR operates and what it's for, I think is really widespread. And I think, unfortunately, we're one of the professions that everybody thinks they know what they're doing until they get themselves into hot water and then don't quite know what to do or how to respond. And I think it's only at that point that there's a level of respect that's afforded to the fact that we are skilled professionals. And like every industry, there is going to be good and bad in everything. And that's the same in every profession, that there is good and bad. I think that HR are there to provide advice and guidance, and they are there to be the moral conscience of an organisation. And they're also the people that carry the stories of individuals within organisations and notice the patterns and trends. And it's their responsibility to speak up to shape the cultures that we want to create. And so I think the key in all of this is actually having the diversity at the very top that is willing to listen and to hear from people who are experts in their field, even when they're saying the uncomfortable truth. When we carry these stories, they're not easy. We actually go home with these things. We're always thinking about them. We're cogitating over them. Sometimes there isn't a straightforward answer. So, the lawyer here on the call will tell you that sometimes there isn't a straightforward answer. And I think that because there are different answers sometimes and different ways of handling things, people will sometimes revert to what they see as most comfortable or easiest. And sometimes that's not always the best thing. And it's not always the case that HR haven't advised that, but the organisation sometimes takes a different view. And sometimes we have to respect the fact that that's the decision they take, and we have to deal with the fallout and the consequences that come from that.
Thank you, Cheryl. I've got one for Kate, and it's around. Sorry, just lost it there. How do organisations ensure redundancy decisions don't disproportionately impact senior leaders from the global majority, especially given existing gaps in representation at senior levels? I think that really fits with what's happening with the ICB clusters that Sam mentioned earlier. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I think both Cheryl and Hamza might be more expert in this space than me, but I think I think absolutely it's a risk, isn't it? We can see the risk materialising before our eyes, can't we, in terms of the new ICB clusters and the leadership, and the lack of visible diverse leadership in those appointments. So there's got to be challenge, hasn't there? There's got to be the challenge around the fairness, the equity of the process, the evaluation, the impact assessments. Is there work being done, or are we just careering into this redundancy programme without any of those safeguards in place to ensure that people are both treated equitably and have equitable outcomes? I think it's positive that in places like industry sort of news outlets that it's being questioned. So actually the fact that it's even being talked about, but I think that we should be vocal about it and questioning and questioning why and how it's happened, because it is happening, and that we should gather the data, because the data tells will give us the evidence base around at least, but nevertheless people are being harmed through this process, aren't they? Undoubtedly, because it's a process that's been rushed into and is leaving people feeling extraordinarily anxious and affecting people's lives in multiple different ways. So I'm not sure what the answer is, other than making sure that both the foundational principles are there from an HR perspective and an employment law perspective, that are there to safeguard people through a process like this one, and to be vocal around the impact, the visible impact that this is having.
Yeah. And I think, thank you, Kate, because actually having your insight, as you say, I'm not the subject matter expert, but what I observe and what I see, and actually calling out what it is we can all still do and question. So I think I saw something there, Nikki, in one of those in one of the questions about that, when you are in more junior roles, how do you speak up and what do you say? Sometimes it is posing the question. Those questions that you can ask are crucial. You will normally know by someone's reaction and behavior, isn't it, whether you've hit a nerve or not. But actually being brave enough to pose that question. May I ask what the process is here? Could you share that with me? May I ask if XYZ groups have been consulted on this before? Okay. we all have the power to ask those may I ask questions, and also coming together as colleagues. So if you do feel apprehensive about doing that on your own, are there a group of you who could come together? We'd actually got some questions we'd like to ask here. Those open questions can be extremely empowering and insightful. And like I said, when you read the room after asking them, they will tell you so much about whether something's been a genuine oversight. Let's go back to the drawing board. We need to do this differently versus a barrage of excuses or you being shut down. Okay, that will tell you all you need to know. So I'd encourage colleagues, what you're hearing here today, if there are things that you think, actually, I want to know more about that, I want to understand that more, I don't know what's going on there, or it feels quite hidden, those may I ask questions can really help you. And you don't need to have the full understanding of it, all right, to be able to pose those. Okay, Nikki, do you think we can take one more, or am I too tight for time?
I think you're too tight for time, but we will get back to all the questions in an email.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. Well, the first thing I need to do here is to absolutely thank our panel for an absolutely brilliant conversation. I appreciated your honesty, your insights, and I think Nikki said it there about the how, isn't it? So much that you shared about the how. As Nikki's just said, what we will do for any questions that we didn't get to, what I normally ask my panel without putting you on the spot, is if we can share those questions with you and you're willing to provide some responses offline, we will send those all to colleagues when we send out our email. Okay. All right. So thank you so much. So Nikki, all right, I am back to you. Okay. Are we ready? So if you remember, I said I was going to tell you a little bit more about the Bravery in the Boardroom program, and just wonderful. Please do keep those thanks coming into our panel, because they were absolutely first class today. Couldn't have asked for more. So this 4-pillar program, what we are looking at here is board senior level. We all know that change needs to lead from the top. We've got our hiring managers, who I always describe our hiring managers up and down the organization, our line managers. They are the ones who hold the power. And what I mean by that is they are who you are. If you are a line manager or a hiring manager, you are responsible for hiring who comes into your team and the organization. You are responsible for developing the people in your team. And also it sits with you about how we retain. So really supporting our hiring managers is absolutely crucial if we want to get to that it's everyone's business, and really see inclusive leadership thriving and inclusive cultures thriving. Okay, absolutely, Molly. That's it. You nailed it in one. Hiring managers are gatekeepers. What about our underrepresented leaders, though, and building those pipelines that are fit for the future? I'd say we change the way you look at succession planning. I want to talk about that, because the one thing I want to call out here is diversity is not lesser. Okay, so when we talk about programs, diverse talent programs for colleagues who want to move into leadership, it's not because diversity is lesser, because they need more help, because they're not capable. It is because quite often we are asking colleagues to step into spaces where they may be the only one. We're asking colleagues to lead teams that may look quite different to what they do. We're asking colleagues to navigate environments that may still be oppressive or even toxic. So that state of readiness term I use is about being equipped to lead when it may be oppressive, when you may be the only one. What does that look and feel like? This pillar is crucial to help retain diverse talent at a senior level as well. And then last but not least, to our colleagues who are holding those specialist portfolio roles, who it's sitting on your shoulders to make this happen. How do we share more with you that best practice, bringing that community of practice together and actually supporting you? And Molly, absolutely. Underrepresented are often not given the opportunity to show your leadership excellence. And that is absolutely crucial why we change that. Shall we click on Nikki? So what do you get under those pillars, right? What do you get under those pillars? We will be delivering a series of workshops within the program. So the idea with the program is that we can come into organizations, okay? We can come into organizations and really support you with building that more inclusive culture and that pipeline that's fit for the future. But for board and senior leaders, what is the work with them? Well, as most of you will know, I spent 5 years in a boardroom. I was a director of strategy and transformation at a community trust in London. I know how important it is for the board to be driving the culture, to lead by example, to build that psychological safety, like I said. So freedom to speak up is not just a strap line that we constantly see. And to be accountable. How often I'm working with so many organizations who say to me that actually my senior colleagues are not holding themselves accountable. You know, this responsibility sits with our EDIB lead and they cannot drive this on their own. The workshops and the masterclass sessions we hold with board senior leaders around brave conversations absolutely digs into that. Okay. Hiring managers, I mentioned, really important we support and train our hiring managers to be able to be active allies, to challenge bias and discrimination, to understand how they can recruit inclusively and really build dynamic, diverse teams that are fit for the future. Not just build them, but equipping our hiring managers with how to lead inclusively as well. And supporting the way that we deliver the program and supports embedding that learning into practice. I mentioned our underrepresented leaders, that confidence of visibility. So displaying that leadership excellence that Molly mentioned. The mentorship and sponsorship, that's so important to go hand in hand with the training that we offer. And what do you get as an organization? You get that stronger and sustained diverse talent pipeline. And as I mentioned there, for our expert leaders who are trying to drive leadership and talent development and better EDI practice within the organization, we support you with aligning this systemically. What do I mean? Well, how do you align your process, your policy, and your actions? How do you bring that together? That's really the work that we do to support the people in that pillar. Shall we click on Nikki? I think I'm nearly there. So what's the structure of the program? It is tailored workshop and masterclasses. We can deliver in person or online. We measure impact, most important, isn't it? How are people coming into the door? What happens to them at the end of those 6 months? It's not just about me and my team standing up and talking with you. It really is about providing you with some of those tools, resource guides, library lists, communities of practice, and learning by experience. Because this, when you are talking about inclusive leadership, it's not just something that I sit in a room for 90 minutes. I've got it. I've got my checklist. Here I go. Those of you who are leading inclusively will know there's much more to it than that. And it's really important that when we work with you, we create that ecosystem. So the program can be delivered over 6 months, but we have flexibility in it to extend it to 9 months because we know operational pressures, needing to align it with other work that's going on. I'm working with a large charity at the moment, and they've had inclusive recruitment training that's run separately. They've had a leadership development program that's run separately, and they've wanted our support on inclusive leadership development to sit alongside that. So we've had to time it so that it fits in and complements those other elements of training. Okay, should we click on Nikki? So, you know, if you've been here in the sessions, if you've been to an in-person or an online Bravery in the Boardroom event, what's really important to me is that it's interactive. This is a non-judgmental space, and that we use a range of approaches to support you. That point there about built-in accountability. Here, you come here by choice, all right? There are people here, and we had over 70 people on the call today. Really, really powerful that you wanted to be here. But when we come into organizations to deliver the program, it's really important that we can also build in that accountability to track behavior changes and outcome and provide that post-program support, okay, to sustain momentum. Shall we click, Nikki? So what am I saying here? If I try to boil this all down, what are we trying to launch here in the program? It's to build that leadership capability. It's to have the shifts in culture. It's so that you see trust increasing. We've spoken about trust today. That talent can thrive in your organization. Systems can align, and most importantly, the bottom line, delivery, engagement, retention, and representation move in the right direction. We see the increases that we're looking for. Click on Nikki for me, please. Can I just check that everybody's on mute for me as well? Thank you. So I don't think I need to say too much more here about why choosing us as your partner, but just to remember, We don't just deliver the training, we help to shape the conversation and drive real change. And these sessions will continue, all right? So even though we are launching a program, even though we're working with organizations and we want you to tell your organizations about the program and what's available, we will still have these spaces where we curate those conversations and thought leadership to help you as well. Shall we click, Nikki? So if you are a member, you will get early access to events, those exclusive learning forums, our BITB toolkit, and peer benchmarking partnerships. So we get asked this all the time, isn't it? Who's doing what, where, how? Where can I learn from best practice? How can I come together and learn? And yes, Sean, we will be in Manchester next year. So taking that roadshow out where we share insights. We've been to London, Leeds, Birmingham. You will get access to some of those insights and events if you become a program member. Shall we click, Nikki? So what are the next steps? There's a lot of information to take in here, right? But I promised that we would launch the program. If you've been with me before, you would have known that this program has been a long time in the making, right? I wanted to get it out here, and today is the day. What I'm asking for you today, if you are a senior leader, we would love to speak with you about bringing the program into your organization and to understand more about where you're at. If you are a more junior colleague joining us today, please spread the word. Talk to your senior colleagues. When I send that email out to you with the program brochure, so the information you've seen today, when I send that out with that follow-up email, please do share it with your senior colleagues. I saw the question about how do we get colleagues who maybe are not passionate about inclusion, who are not inclusion experts, who are not in the minority. How do we get more colleagues onto these calls, into sessions? Well, let's start that by sharing this, telling them a little bit more about what Bravery in the Boardroom is about. Share the recording when it comes out too. But I am here for you, as you know, so stay connected, jump onto the events. If this is your first time, you'll be added to the mailing list as a result of joining today's session. Access the podcast, access the resources. Thank you so much, Janice. It would be brilliant if you could share it. If you've got your phone with you, scan this QR code here now. This will take you directly to where you can access the Bravery in the Boardroom YouTube channel, our insights reports, and other information available for you. Okay? Really important that you don't lose that, and to keep that momentum going and to access those resources that are available to everybody. Okay? Have I got one more slide, Nikki? Am I right? We are at 1:44, and I wanted to just end today's session by first of all thanking our panel again, thanking everybody who's been here, who's given us 75 minutes of your time. But I want to close today's session by playing this short clip. This is from one of our Bravery in the Boardroom podcast interviews with Susie Levy, the author of Mind the Inclusion Gap. And I think what she says here just really sets the tone about what we're talking about what really drives change in creating more inclusive cultures and turning the dial now. So Nikki, if you could press play for me. My goodness me, what you've just unpacked there is absolute gold, right? Absolute gold.
A nice person doesn't know what they don't know. You have to believe and see that niceness and inclusion aren't the same thing. And I said that, but I think we should unpick that a little bit, right? First thing is, you don't know what you don't know. And nice people don't know very much. Now, they could if they'd gone on a knowledge journey, but they're not related at all. They're totally unrelated. And so if you lean on your niceness and don't go get the knowledge around what it's like not to be you, you are at a huge disadvantage. You have to decide to give a damn, because with knowledge, you can dismiss it very, very easily. What's my role in using the power that I have to take an empathetic stance to figure out how to fix it? So you have to get that knowledge, decide to care, and then use your positions of power, because all of us have moments when we're in positions of power. Sometimes I'm in high power, high influence, and other times I'm not in high power, high influence. But when I am, it's taking that time and using my voice to create the change I want to see. So I think it's a three-part path. You've got to have knowledge, a level of empathy and giving a damn, and then you've got to go do something when you have those positions of power and influence.
My goodness me, what you've just unpacked there is absolute gold. But I really urge people to listen very carefully to what you unpacked just now. Thank you so much, Nikki. And thank you, everybody. So we are now going to close the webinar. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for all of you for your thank you messages into the chat and for your feedback. I really appreciate your time. This podcast episode, we will share the link with you. It's from the Bravery in the Boardroom podcast, where I interviewed Susie Levy. There's a long version of this. All right. And we will share that with you as well. So give me a couple of days. We will get that recording link over to you, and we will get everything that was shared with you today. If there are any links that our colleagues who joined the conversation shared today and you would like us to share those links on, please do drop them to me on an email and we will get those out for you. So really appreciate the engagement, okay, the support that colleagues offered, the brilliant questions. Okay, remember, don't forget, we will still return to you with any questions that we missed, but it is 1:47 now. I'm 2 minutes over. So I am going to close the webinar now and wish you all a wonderful Friday and have a good weekend. And we will see you all soon. Take care, everybody. See you later. Bye.